So practical customer questions that the customers should be asking at this point. How long is the project going to take? How do I deploy this? And what am I buying? We'll focus on the first two here. So how long does a typical project take? Typically, it's about 12 weeks, but this is obviously scope dependent. Trade finance has many more models. Trade finance has a broader documentation. Something like invoice processing is maybe a little bit less because you have less to work with, but maybe you have multiple countries that might build on that. So typically, you're taking a way to implement your process end to end with maybe without machine learning in place. So focusing on RPA and people, which is this first production round here. And then once you have the ability to get to data, now you can use that data to be able to build machine learning off of that. So I'm not going to go too deep into this. This is an example, but obviously you have different phases that you need to build out, and your scope is going to make it go longer in some cases or shorter in others. I know typical RPA implementations, 12 weeks is very, very long. A lot of times those are going to be 1 to 2 weeks per system, which is very typical within the WorkFusion world as well. So it just depends on your scope. And I'll touch on that a little bit. There are different roles that are involved. We'll have more content on how to pull these together within your process with your project. But typically you'll have, if WorkFusion's driving this, this is typically what, or I guess typically you're pulling it through. So from a sales side, you might have a solution consultant and an architect. And then you definitely have a SME from the business side that's able to understand the process. You'll have a project manager on the customer side, as well as from the WorkFusion or the partner side as well to help drive this project forward. You'll have some combination of developers, data analysts, machine learning engineers, and maybe a data scientist. So because we're providing that auto ML capability, you don't need a data science to be able to do data science work. You don't need a data scientist to do machine learning. You can use a machine learning engineer, which is a highly skilled engineer. It's gone through a lot of training, but they're still able to do a lot of the work. You just don't need a PhD in data science to be able to apply machine learning. We've packaged up a lot of this to be able to facilitate that. So depending on the phase of your project, you're probably using a different combination of people. Developers are going to focus on the work very early on, getting the process set up. But then your data analyst and your machine learning engineer might take hold to be able to take those manual tasks that the developer created and set up that the SMEs were taking, have those set up correctly and generating the right data to train your machine learning. So it probably starts with getting your end-to-end process, starts with the manual tasks, and then you make sure those manual tasks are set up correctly, and then the machine learning part takes on. The machine learning engineers probably are not focused on the end-to-end process. They're probably focused on those specific cognitive bots, the specific manual tasks where you want those cognitive bots to play a role. Complexity is going to range, so this focuses on the scope dependency with this. You have different projects that are going to be quick wins, some that are going to have some mid-level of complexity, and some that are just going to be very complex. Trade finance is on the complex side. Invoice processing is kind of probably more in the middle one. So if you're just doing RPA, you're just doing machine learning, or you have different workflows that you're working through, you have different types of aspects you might consider as what's going to be a long project versus a short project. I'm going really fast for this, I apologize. Depending on what type of project you have, you'll have different timelines associated to it. So you can see the quick win RPA project, maybe 2 to 4 weeks. You can see the complex RPA and ML project that's maybe 16 plus weeks with different levels of people involved to help facilitate this. So how do you know which one this is? Part of it is understanding what systems are involved, particularly for the RPA side. Part of it's understanding what machine learning you need to be able to solve it. So to estimate the machine learning effort, which is the new topic, these are some of the examples, some of the questions that you need. So I'm not going to go deep into it because I provide a link here at the bottom that gives you access to the knowledge base. And from the knowledge base, you'd be able to go deep into each of these questions and see a few more. I also covered a lot of these questions previously about an hour ago in this section where I was talking through the different variety, different fields. So there's lots of different areas that help define, do you have complex machine learning or not? This is all part of that. Always keep in mind you want to take an MVP strategy. Build your end-to-end automation and then make it better. Build your intake process for 5 types of emails that come in. Don't do 500 before you start. Really trying to get value out of your automation and then make it better and better over time. Define 100 rules first and then do the other 300 later. Do one machine learning model, collect data with people for the rest, and then build your other models after that. So different ways to approach it, but try and keep the MVP mindset. Try and make sure you're always delivering value and just making it better and better over time. So I need to talk about the software real quick. We only have a couple of minutes here. So from the software, you have a large footprint for the full part of the software, but a few variations you can do with this. So you have an app server that will have the control tower and workspace. You have a DB server that will have the database and the password vault. You have RPA, you have machine learning, you have OCR, analytics, platform monitor, with some BPM kind of pulling these together. So when you deploy WorkFusion, we talked a little bit about this. You can deploy on-premise or in the cloud. Most of our customers, because they have sensitive data, are on-premise. And this can be on-premise to the customer or on-premise to the partner or the service provider. But there is a cloud version as well. You can deploy this in the cloud. The demo environment I showed you was in the cloud. It's internal to our system, but it's still a cloud-based deployment. Now, if you're doing POC work and you want to have something that's scalable to production, SPA Sandbox is a good way to validate some of this work in an environment that's on a lighter infrastructure footprint. So infrastructure footprint is these two tables. On the left-hand side, we have the full production. On the right-hand side, we have the SPA Sandbox version. So on the left-hand side, full production, 7 servers, most of them reasonable. The challenge is always the machine learning one. It has a lot of requirements because it's doing a lot of experimentation, doing a lot of the machine learning crunching in the background. Now, WorkFusion is not doing machine learning with GPUs. It's not doing it with really complex hardware. It's doing it with relatively straightforward and simple and regular hardware. It is asking for a lot of it, but it's not actually unreasonable. It's relatively simple, or not relatively simple, but it's reasonable to acquire. Now, the big numbers do scare people in the CPUs and RAM, so you can cluster them. So if you can't find one box that has 32 CPUs, if you can do it with 2 boxes that have 16 CPUs apiece, then maybe you're fine. So you can cluster it, add more servers to simplify it. Now, it is a large footprint, so sometimes it takes a while to acquire it. And sometimes it's a long process to go through. So we have the SPA Sandbox version available to have a laptop installable version to be able to prove this out. Now, the laptop gets you the app server, the DB server, OCR, and RPA to be able to execute everything locally. The machine learning still needs to be its own separate server, but in many cases, you don't even need to do the machine learning. You're just proving out the RPA, maybe proving out the RPA first, and then you're moving into machine learning when you get to production, or maybe a different use case. So different ways to work through it. Some caveats with the SPA Sandbox, it obviously needs to have access to the systems if you're doing RPA, but you are able to, with SPA Sandbox, get a very light start from an infrastructure perspective, easily add cognitive with it, and then make something that's portable to production. So you have these slides, so this is just some scaling. For capacity planning, I'm not going to spend much time with this. There's a link that goes through the capacity planning that can give you more details on how to scale this out. There's a lot of footnotes in here, but basically, when you're doing capacity planning for your spreadsheet, I think we even have a calculator that's posted. Yep, we do. We have a calculator that's posted on this KB page, so it's far better to go to the KB page than have me talk through it for sure. And then the final piece is, how do I start? So how do I start? There's a maturity model that you can look through as a follow-up. There's also a handful of process maps. I usually don't talk through these. I'm just writing them as reference, areas where automation plays a role and areas where maybe you can find some opportunities to start with, as well as a couple of quick case studies to pull those through.